Donald Trump says no to another debate with Kamala Harris in the US presidential election. He claims he won Tuesday's head-to-head, but fundraisers tell a different story with a deluge of donations for Harris the next day. So what's next for both campaigns? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. Donald Trump says he won't do a second TV debate with Kamala Harris in the US presidential election campaign, claiming he doesn't need to, as he won last Tuesday's head-to-head decisively. That's not a view shared by many independent political commentators, and not by campaign donors either, with a windfall going Harris's way in the 24 hours after her televised duel with Trump. Presidential elections are a lot more complicated, of course, than TV debates, but they're especially important this year, with the last one burying Joe Biden's campaign. And the first meeting of any kind between Trump and Harris was seen by both camps as a critical moment. Trump's team might rather forget some of the takeaway lines, such as immigrants dining on cats and dogs snatched from their American owners, a claim widely ridiculed. Since then, Harris has poked fun at Trump's performance at her rallies, while his side say she's avoiding substance and detail. Is this a defining week in the election? And will there be a second debate? We'll answer those questions and more with our panel of guests in a moment. But first, this report from Laura Khan.
US campaign season is in full swing. Presidential candidate Kamala Harris is in North Carolina and Donald Trump in Arizona. Harris has increased a slight lead in opinion polls following a debate on Tuesday that many say she came out as a winner and she wants another showdown.
I believe we owe it to the voters to have another debate. Because this election and what is at stake could not be more important.
But Trump ruled this out and said he was the victor.
We've done 2 debates, and because they were successful, there will be no third debate.
We find at the national level that Harris is in the lead relative to Trump. But on those key fundamentals issues like the economy and inflation, Trump ultimately has the leads.
In their televised presidential debate on Tuesday night, Trump had been expected to focus on the Democrats' track record on immigration, a leading policy in the Trump campaign. But when questioned, seemed to fall into a trap set by Harris on that issue.
People start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies.
Some analysts said it was traps like this that put Trump on the back foot, coming across as defensive, annoyed, and often unstable. When Trump did mention immigration, he gave an unsubstantiated claim of Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio, consuming pets.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Towards the end of the debate, Trump challenged Harris on inflation under President Joe Biden. Harris is often criticised for not clearly defining her policies, and she didn't this time, but she did use the moment to land a punch.
Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country.
And she reflected this slogan at a rally in North Carolina.
I said it then, I say it now. It's time to turn the page.
And although Trump's cats and dogs statement gained much ridicule, he continued down that path.
Residents are reporting that the migrants are walking off with the town's geese. They take in the geese.
Trump and Harris are almost neck and neck in the race to the White House. And with Trump turning down another face-to-face, they have until November to entice undecided voters, whether it be through policy hype or enthusiasm. Laura Khan for Inside Story, Al Jazeera.
Well, with just over 50 days until Election Day on November the 5th, let's discuss all of this with our three guests today who are in the US. First, in Washington, D.C., we have John Malcolm, Vice President of the Institute for Constitutional Government at the Heritage Foundation. He's also a former US federal prosecutor. In Brunswick, Andrew Rudalevige. He's Thomas Brackett Reed Professor of Government at Bowdoin College. And in Washington, D.C., Joi Chaney, political strategist and domestic legal policy expert. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us today on Inside Story as we look at where the US election campaign stands. Well, we know what Donald Trump says. He says he won that debate on Tuesday. Joi, did he?
I think the American people have spoken. He definitely did not win. And if he had won, he'd be having a third debate.
So pick it up for me, Andrew. Even Trump's allies are saying that he had a bad night. How bad was it?
Well, I don't think there are many people outside the very inner Trump circle who are saying that he won. What they're telling him, I'm not sure. But it certainly was not a night where he took advantage of his opportunities to press home his main points on policies like immigration or the cost of living. He allowed the vice president to define him in some ways, and I think that's going to be, rankling him somewhat, and certainly rankling his allies, that he did not allow himself to stay on focus, that he was distracted by attacks, as we saw in rally size, goaded about issues regarding his various criminal and civil trials, January 6th. A lot of the things that were brought up, he didn't really want to answer directly or double down on positions he's taken that are quite unpopular. So I don't think it helped him very much at all in the wider range of things. That said, things are very close.
John, you are a Republican. Let's get your view on this and where it stands, because, I mean, if you just look a few months back, it was, I think, 61 days ago that there was that Trump assassination attempt, which he survived, which everyone thought may have made him unassailable. But then, of course, the debate with President Biden pulling out, a good convention for Kamala Harris, and now this debate. It's a complete transformation, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's right. Obviously, a series of unexpected events. Kamala Harris did not have to run the gauntlet of primary season with debates against her competitors. She's only done one television interview. It was with a journalist. It was with a friendly journalist, and she had Tim Waltz there to help. I'm not an insider to the Trump administration. I don't work for the campaign. This may be the one thing that Joi and I agree on during the course of this meeting, which is I do think that Kamala Harris got the better of Donald Trump during that debate. He lets things get under his skin and he gets distracted and goes off on tangents. And she did a very effective job of poking him and getting under his skin. She, of course, didn't answer a lot of the questions from the moderators. The first moderator asked the question, are you better off in terms of your economic situation than you were 4 years ago? She didn't answer that. Do you believe in any restrictions on abortion? She didn't answer that. The moderators let her get away with it. And so did Donald Trump, because he got distracted by these various attacks on him that he felt the need to respond to. I think somewhat to his detriment. How much of an effect that's going to have on the election is very hard to say, because the reality is that all of these polls are within the margin of error, and the entire election is going to come down to what happens in about 6 or 7 states.
But Andrew, if he says no to another debate and she wants another debate, doesn't it, in the minds of American people, make him look like the coward?
Well, to the degree people are paying attention to that level of detail, certainly, I wouldn't be shocked, in fact, if he did decide ultimately that he would accept another debate, grudgingly, of course, because he's not going to concede that he didn't win the first debate. But ultimately, the Harris camp wants another debate. Trump camp maybe needs another debate. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw something come around. Remember that the former president said he wasn't going to do this debate a while ago. And, while he is missing having President Biden as his opponent, he is now, I think, should be at least a little better prepared for another go round with Vice President Harris. So, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the last word on the subject.
John, would you agree with that, depending on what the polls say, when we get better polling on the outcome of this debate? If he thinks that he is well behind in the polls, that he could lose the election. He's got a great deal at stake, hasn't he, here? Because it's not just winning and being president. He's got those court cases against him. Potentially, his freedom is at stake here. Do you think he might change his mind and have a debate after all?
I doubt it. There's a vice presidential debate that's scheduled for October the 1st. He is spending a lot of time, as is Kamala Harris, in those swing states. He's doing in addition to his rallies, he's doing teleforums. He's doing interviews with journalists. That's something that Kamala Harris isn't doing. And I suppose you could accuse her of being a coward. I'm not going to do that. I think that both these campaigns have their strategists that are laying out a ground game. Voting has already started in a couple of states in terms of absentee and mail-in balloting, and they're going to do what they think it's going to take to get their candidate across the finish line.
Joi, we know what Harris's campaign is saying, that she wants another debate. But in some ways, does she really need another debate? She won. She slayed the dragon. That will stay the narrative if there isn't a second debate.
She doesn't need a second debate. She has already, made the case and made it clear who Donald Trump is and, more importantly, who she is. Now she can go direct to consumer, as she's always been doing. She can do rallies. She can be online. And I know that there's a lot of critique that she hasn't done mainstream media, but most Americans aren't looking at CNN or MSNBC or any of these major news outlets. They're getting their news in other ways, new media ways. And she is all over those outlets. So she will do the traditional media. She's been vice president for 4 years. She's done lots of interviews. So people know that she can do those interviews. She's already done one. It's totally normal to have the vice president and the presidential candidate do an interview together. That makes sense. She'll do others. But more importantly, she's going direct to the voters, because ultimately that's what matters. Democrats have learned that you can be all over network news, but at the end of the day, you have to reach consumers where they are. And they're not always on those big network news stations. They're actually, paying attention to social media, paying attention to the videos that she puts out, engaging with a non-traditional media, engaging on the campaign trail. We are not doing this. They are not doing this in a traditional way. They're doing it in a way that they know will be right for this time and will win. We are not going back, as she says, and that means you have to take different tactics. So we're real thrilled about that. And one thing that John said I want to counter. They said that he said that she didn't answer questions about the economy. She absolutely answered questions about the economy. And on abortion, she said she supported restoring Roe, which had some restrictions on abortion. So I don't want to, suggest that she didn't answer those questions. She absolutely did. And if Donald Trump had been smart, he would have doubled down on the economy. He would have doubled down on immigration instead of making up other, going off on a tangent. And John, I think you admitted that. Like, the fact of the matter is, she answered the questions. If she had a third debate, she would have an opportunity to even do more of it. But she doesn't have to do it. She can go direct.
Let me bring in Andrew on this. Okay, quickly, John, go ahead.
Yeah, so with all due respect, through all these alternative social media platforms that Joi talked about, you don't get asked tough questions by journalists and have to answer them in front of a national audience. And she didn't answer a question. She said she would restore Roe versus Wade. That is not the same thing as answering a question of, do you support any limitations on abortion throughout the 9 months of a pregnancy? She did not answer that question.
She absolutely said that.
Are you better off 4 years ago than you are now in terms of your pocketbook? Because the answer was clearly no.
John, we are absolutely better off than we were 4 years ago at the end, in the middle of a pandemic. We're absolutely better off with that. She made clear about that. And then with respect to abortion, let's be clear, there is no place, the full 9 months, you can't have an abortion all 9 months in America anywhere. Pre-Roe, post-Roe, any of that. These are lies. These are not true. And I know the Heritage Foundation is smart enough to know that.
That you are absolutely wrong, that there are many states that say that the life and health of a mother enables them to have, including right up to birth, partial birth abortion. And Kamala Harris has spoken in favor.
We prioritize the health of the mother. Absolutely. Kamala Harris and I believe Donald Trump at this point or believe in exceptions for the health of the mother as well as rape
For the
and
life
incest.
of the mother.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the
We care
life
about
of the
mom.
mother.
OK. If
We
I
care about
can,
moms.
I could
We
bring
care about their
Andrew
lives.
back in. A moment ago, Joi was talking about the importance of social media and how that is now the battleground. But I think it's worth stating the debate. I looked up the audience for the debate, and it was, according to Nielsen, which is the rating company that decides who's watching live events on television, 67.1 million Americans watched the debate. That's much bigger than the 51 million who watched Joe Biden's disastrous debate with Trump. So the live event is still important, isn't it, Andrew?
It is. I think it is. Certainly, it's important, too, not only in the live audience, but in the downstream effects, right? The debate gets sort of translated into mainstream media headlines and stories. People may not read those stories in full, but they see the headlines, they get the gist. They get the vibe. Social media is important, obviously, in encouraging the most enthusiastic voters, but not everybody is extremely online. In fact, most Americans, though hard to imagine from the perspective of political scientists or those who are deeply involved in the political process, right, don't pay that much attention to politics. If you look back into the early part of 2024, some large percentage of Americans really didn't believe that Joe Biden and Donald Trump were actually the candidates again. And, of course, in Joe Biden's case, they turned out to be rather prescient in that regard. So, no, I do think the mainstream media is important in helping to set the agenda. I do think the tone they take, for example, if there's sort of a widespread belief that the vice president is ducking questions, that will play its way out again sort of downstream and become part of how she's defined. I think that's something she could avoid and probably ought to. So I do think the debates are important. They set this agenda. They bear on the broader impression of the candidates moving forward. Again, does she need another debate? No, but I do think she needs to continue to build on this momentum and probably to, develop, maybe not develop, but to express this more specific policy agenda in a way that is pretty transparent and, in a way that helps her distinguish herself from the Biden administration while at the same time, obviously trying to take credit for its achievements. This is always a difficult road for sitting vice presidents. It's why we haven't elected that many sitting vice presidents right after their term, because you're trying to walk that very thin line. The very short campaign is probably a help to the vice president in this regard.
John, Joi earlier on said that Trump missed an obvious goal on the economy. The other issue was immigration, and that's where Harris, when she was asked about immigration, decided to swing the conversation to his rallies. That clearly triggered him. And then you got something which has had all sorts of memes on social media. You got these comments that you heard in our report at the beginning of the programme. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. I mean, this was an awful own goal, wasn't it, John?
Look, I would not have said that, and he's been mocked for it, and I have no idea whether what he said is true or not true. And to me, that's utterly irrelevant. What is completely relevant is the fact that we have a porous border. There have been 10 million at least, probably well more than 10 million illegal immigrants who have come in under the Biden-Harris administration. That does not count the nearly 2 million or more gotaways, people who sort of snuck in or unaccounted for.
Well, yeah, you're making that point, but President Trump didn't make that point at all clearly, and he had plenty of time to do so.
Yes, I agree with that. I think that he had opportunities to pound that. He did at other points in the debate. He got a little better towards the end. But as I said before, I think he got distracted and he didn't make these points as clearly as he should have.
Well, he got distracted because she very successfully baited him, didn't she, John? Let me give you another example. She said that military leaders said the former president was a disgrace. World leaders are laughing at him. And then he quoted Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister of Hungary. Now, number one, he's very controversial because people say he's authoritarian and very close to Putin. But number two, given the audience in swing states and middle America, how many people in the audience that Donald Trump was trying to swing, how many of them have ever heard of Viktor Orban?
Look, if you're asking me, did Kamala Harris successfully goad Donald Trump, and did it take him down rabbit holes that I think he would have been better off avoiding? I think the answer to that is yes. I know the Trump campaign doesn't say that, but I agree with that. But there are points that he could make in his favor. He did a little bit better towards the end, but he did a very effective job of goading him, and I agree that he took the bait all too often.
Joi, when President Biden, Joi, was in the race, a lot of the issues were about age. Is this man too old to be commander-in-chief? But Trump now is the oldest presidential candidate in US history. He now has that role. Do you think there should be more attack of his age, and whether Trump is as sharp now in these debates as he was 4 years ago or 8 years ago?
So he's definitely not as sharp. I'm not an ageist. I don't love having that conversation, but it's clear that he's not at the top of his game. What Kamala Harris did was more than just goad him. She revealed him to be someone who's willing to use race, right, and xenophobia. What happened in Springfield, you have an international audience. We have people from all over the world who live in the United States. So if you are a Haitian immigrant, those people are afraid in Springfield, Illinois. There was a bomb threat in Springfield related to Donald Trump and J.D. Vance's erroneous claims. The city manager of Springfield made clear that there have been no reports. So, John, do us a favor, please say directly what he is saying is a lie. There are not animals missing from the streets of this city. And that is not something that is happening within this immigrant community. Those are very harmful things, and children could be harmed by those kinds of comments. So she revealed him to be the kind of person who would do that.
John, quickly.
Yeah, and she revealed him to be
Illinois.
Let John respond quickly.
Well, I don't live in Springfield, Illinois. I have no idea. However, Kamala Harris, in terms of her record and explaining why she has flip-flopped on various positions, I've characterized that as a lie. And in fact, I would rely on someone who knows her quite well, Bernie Sanders, who said on Meet the Press this last week, why are you concerned about her flip-flopping and all of these positions? She goes, no, I know she's a progressive. She's just saying what she needs to say in order to get elected. There is a lot of dishonesty going on within the Harris campaign.
Bernie Sanders is a Harris supporter. But let me just say, moving on, as well as Dick Cheney. So everyone from Dick Cheney to Bernie Sanders is for Kamala Harris. Let's be clear about that. And don't forget Taylor Swift.
Okay.
But let me just say something else.
Sorry, Joe, we've got to move on because we're running out of time. Andrew, just give us the impact of a debate like this in the scheme of things, because we've only got 2 months now, less than 2 months to election day. There was no big bounce in the polling after the convention, and yet the media said that was almost flawless for Harris. So will this make a difference? And if it doesn't make a difference, what is there out there? Are we waiting for an October surprise? What is there out there that might change things?
Well, I think a lot of the results, of the 2024 election have been visible to us for a long time. America is, let's face it, a polarized place. People's beliefs about the political parties and candidates are baked in. Normally, debates don't change things, right? It's rare that they do. Obviously, the debate between former President Trump and President Biden, made a big impact, but that is a rarity. This, I think, was an important debate in that it allowed the vice president to present herself as presidential and, as has been noted, to try to goad President Trump successfully into veering off topic. That said, I think what we've seen over the last year is a real stability in the former president's support, right? And indeed, a really remarkable stability in his support going back to almost 2015, whereas President Biden's support had fallen off quite a lot, even within the Democratic Party. That's now bounced back with a new candidate. And so we are seeing a battle really over whether this will be a replay of 2020, where the Democratic Party managed to piece together a coalition that, of course, won narrowly in a lot of key swing states, or whether it will be 2016. where Mr. Trump loses the national popular vote, but is able to effectively run the table, draw an inside straight. Sorry for the poker reference. In terms of winning those swing states narrowly enough to get a victory in the Electoral College, we know that that's possible. And
okay,
it's what the Trump
John,
to do.
if I could bring you in, Trump often, when things are not going his way, he starts sacking people. His campaign team, though, are by most observers seen pretty competent and sane. He's now taking advice, particularly from Laura Loomer, a far-right political activist who was on his plane. She tweeted recently about the White House smelling like curry if Harris was elected, infantile and clearly racist. Are you worried about the way Trump's campaign is being directed, and does it need a real reset now?
Oh, I don't think it's going to be reset. He has Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, is there. Kellyanne Conway is there.
He might sack them. You know what he does when he's losing. He might sack them.
Well, he hasn't, and he's stuck with them so far in this campaign, and I expect they'll be there at the end of the campaign. I don't know anything about Laura Loomer. There are always outsiders, some who are quite extreme on the right and on the left, who are trying to get to the candidates, and sometimes they succeed. But at the moment, his campaign team has been quite steady, and I assume he's going to stick with them for the rest of the campaign. And he has a lot of bread and butter issues to run on: the border, crime, energy independence, the economy. These are solid issues for him that may take him over the finish line.
Solid issues that could take him over the finish line. Joi, quickly from you, what is your biggest fear as a Harris supporter?
Well, first of all, let me just be clear. The thing is that you just referenced there are racist. And so we can't normalize that. And I think Donald Trump should fire those people, but he seems to be leaning into it. Look, my greatest fear as a Harris supporter is Donald Trump always polls worse than he actually does in the polls, because so many people are embarrassed to say that they're voting for him. Now, that ought to be a shame, and I would be embarrassed about that, but they are embarrassed to say they're voting for him. And so sometimes they don't reflect that vote in the polls. So we're always trying to make sure that Harris is running from behind, right? We have to be way ahead in the polls in order to claim any kind of real, headwind and success. We're going in the right direction, but that's our fear. Our fear is that, we won't ever be able to really know where we are, and we have to be way out in front.
Okay,
we also want to make sure that we're focusing state by state.
Joi, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our guests who joined us today: John Malcolm, Andrew Rudalevige and Joi Chaney. You'll find extensive coverage of the campaign all the way to voting day on November the 5th on Al Jazeera, with analysis too at aljazeera.com. If you have thoughts or comments, always post them at our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or use X, where we are at AJ Inside Story. I'll see you back here very soon. From me, James Bays, and the team here, please stay safe. Bye-bye for now.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.